have all the flowers gone? Where have all the flowers gone? Where have all the flowers gone? Young girls have picked them everyone. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will they ever learn?
Welcome, everyone. Here we are again, gathered together in our spiritual community of hope, courage, and compassion. Take a deep breath. Let me see you do it. And now we open our hearts and minds as we enter this special place together. As is customary, whenever Unitarian Universalists gather together, we begin by lighting a chalice. Our candle flame represents the flaming chalice that is the symbol of the living tradition of our faith. Our chalice lighting words today are by Reverend Sarah Asher. May the light from this flame be a beacon of our faith in days that grow dark and dreary. May the light from this flame be warmth to our spirits during nights of restless searching. May the light from this flame be a celebration of the truth, meaning, and joy we find within our walls and in our dreams. The light that we now kindle is a reminder of those who gave their lives for the freedom we cherish. May we never allow the light to falter, not in our chalice and not in our hearts.
Ourselves This World by Mary Oliver. I would like to write a poem about the world that has in it nothing fancy, but it seems impossible. Whatever the subject, the morning sun glimmers it. The tulip feels the heat and flaps its petals open and becomes a star. The ants bore into the peony bud, and there is a dark pinprick well of sweetness. As for the stones on the beach, forget it. Each one could be set in gold. So I tried with my eyes shut, but of course the birds were singing, and the aspen trees were shaking the sweetest music out of their leaves. And that was followed by, guess what? A momentous and beautiful silence. As comes to all of us in little earfuls if we're not too hurried to hear it. As for spiders, how the dew hangs in their webs, even if they say nothing or seem to say nothing. So fancy is this world, who knows, maybe they sing. So fancy in this world, who knows, maybe the stars sing too, and the ants and the peonies and the warm stones, so happy to be where they are on the beach instead of being locked up in gold.
Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helper fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. Swift to its close, ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim and glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. Oh, thou who changes not, abide with me. I fear no foe, with thee at hand to blaze. Ills have no weight, tears no bitterness. Where is death's sting? Where, grave, thy victory? I triumph still if thou abide with me. Hold out thy cross before my closing eye. Shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. Heaven's morning rays and earth's faint shadows flee. In life, in death, oh Lord, abide with me.
In November of 1989, a Park Service curator, who was also a Vietnam veteran, was organizing a container of memorabilia gathered at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C., when a letter and a small photograph of a Vietnamese soldier and his daughter, left by an American veteran, caught his attention. Our reading today is that letter. November 18th, 1989. Dear Sir, for 22 years, I have carried your picture in my wallet. I was only 18 years old that day we faced one another on that trail in Chu Vietnam. Why you did not take my life, I'll never know. You stared at me so long, armed with your AK-47, and yet you did not fire. Forgive me for taking your life. I was reacting just the way I was trained, to kill VC or gooks. Hell, you weren't even considered human. Just gook target, one and the same. Since that day in 1967, I have grown a great deal, and I have a great deal of respect for life and other peoples of the world. So many times over the years, I have stared at your picture and your daughter, I suspect. Each time my heart and guts would burn with the pain of guilt. I have 2 daughters myself now. One is 20. The other is 22 and has blessed me with 2 granddaughters, ages 1 and 4. Today I visit the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in D.C. I have wanted to come here for several years now to say goodbye to many of my former comrades. Somehow I hope and believe they will know I'm here. I truly loved many of them, as I'm sure you loved many of your former comrades. As of today, we are no longer enemies. I perceive you as a brave soldier defending his homeland. Above all else, I can now respect the importance that life held for you. I suppose that is why I'm able to be here today. As I leave here today, I leave your picture and this letter. It is time for me to continue the life process and release my pain and guilt. Forgive me, sir. I shall try to live my life to the fullest, an opportunity that you and many others were denied. I'll sign off now, sir. So until we chance meet again in another time and place, rest in peace. Respectfully, Richard A. Luttrell, 101st Airborne Division.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was so lovely. Well read. Thank you. In the last 3 years, we've seen more pictures of the effects of war than any other time I can remember. It's broken my heart to watch as war after war has broken out all over the world. It feels like humankind will never learn from its past mistakes. As we prepare for Veterans Day on Tuesday, I'd like to affirm that we humans have a huge capacity for forgiveness. And in that lies hope that one day peace will break out instead of war. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, the guns of World War I, the Great War, fell silent. The war they called the War to End All Wars was over. In Europe and around the world, November 11th is called Remembrance Day. And the Sunday before, which is today, is Remembrance Sunday. On Remembrance Sunday, church services are dedicated to all those who lost their lives in the Great War and all of the wars ever since. In the United States, November 11th is Veterans Day rather than Remembrance Day. It's the day on which we celebrate all those who served or are serving in the military, the ones who are still alive. The ones whose lives were lost are remembered on Memorial Day in May. These federal holidays have a special meaning for me. They bring back memories from my childhood of selling red paper poppies every November to raise money for veterans. Memories of my dad, who was present when the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp was liberated in 1945. He never forget what he saw, and it affected him very deeply. Memories my dad told me about his older brother, who he looked up to. His Hurricane airplane was shot down in North Africa in 1942. He was only 22 years old when he died. That war, like all wars, affected families like mine for generations, and I'm sure many of you who are watching today, with us today, can share stories of loved ones who were affected by conflict. I mentioned a moment ago that when I was a kid, I sold poppies to raise money for veterans. Back then, Remembrance Day was also called Poppy Day. For several weeks beforehand, paper poppies were sold in bars and restaurants, busy shopping areas, in schools and churches, just about everywhere. And just about everyone would wear one in their lapel in memory of those who had died in war. If you watch any British TV news or sports program today, you'll see that the people who are presenting it are all wearing a red poppy on their lapel. The poppy is a symbol of the trenches of the Great War. The artillery shells that churned the land into a moonscape created a perfect environment for poppy flowers to flourish. Amidst the carnage of mechanized war, vast fields of red poppies sprang up. I think we have some images we can just show for a couple of seconds to share with you. There they go. In 1915, John McCrae, a Canadian Army medical doctor who had just witnessed the death of a friend, wrote a poem that became famous. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. John McCrae died of pneumonia in January of 1918 and was buried in a war cemetery in France. 2 days before the armistice went into effect on November 11th of that year, Moira Michael, an American woman who was a professor at the University of Georgia, wrote a poem in John McCrae's honor. She called her poem, "We Shall Keep the Faith." Afterwards, she taught a class of disabled veterans at the University of Georgia. Seeing their need for financial support, she had the idea of selling silk poppies as a means of raising money. The poppy was inspired by the opening lines of McCrae's poem. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row. In 1921, her efforts led to the poppy being adopted as a symbol of remembrance for war veterans in both America and in Great Britain. Known as the Poppy Lady, Moira Michael retired from the University of Georgia in 1934. In 1948, 4 years after she died, the US Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp with a poppy picture in her honor. You can still buy poppy buttons for Memorial Day and Veterans Day online. They're sold through the American Legion and the VFW. I've even found some available online from Walmart. But people don't seem to sell them in shopping malls and bars and restaurants anymore like they did when I was a kid. In 1954, America renamed Armistice Day as Veterans Day. It's been suggested that President Eisenhower wanted to rename the holiday because the Korean War armistice, which had just recently been signed, did not result in an outright victory for the United States. But I think the real reason was that World War I turned out not to be the war to end all wars. World War II broke out 20 years later, followed quickly by the Korean War. I think Eisenhower just wanted to celebrate the living rather than the dead on November the 11th. Not everyone agreed with the change. In 1973, the author Kurt Vonnegut, who himself was a veteran of World War II, he wrote, "Armistice Day was sacred. Veterans Day is not. So I will throw Veterans Day over my shoulder. Armistice Day I will keep. I don't want to throw away any sacred things." I do think that Vonnegut was right, that something was lost, although I'm not sure why. Memorial Day in May feels to me to be more like an excuse to have a barbecue than honor dead heroes. And Veterans Day feels like a day off from work to begin preparations for Thanksgiving and to start our Christmas shopping. I don't think either one will replace Remembrance Day for me. It feels like the need to remember the sacrifice of service members of all sides and their families has been diminished. Shortly after the 9/11 terror attacks in New York City, a man named Pat Tillman gave up his career as a football player to join the army. Tillman subsequently lost his life in Afghanistan. Initially, the army covered up the fact that Tillman had been killed by friendly fire. And that cover-up was one of the reasons a US Army Ranger named Rory Fanning became disenchanted with the military. Fanning left the army after Tillman's death and walked across America to raise money in his name. He wrote a book, Worth Fighting For, An Army Ranger's Journey Out of the Military and Across America. A few years ago, Rory Fanning wrote a letter that was published in the Guardian newspaper. He wrote this: "I'm more angry and frustrated with each passing Veterans Day because it gets clearer and clearer that Veterans Day is less about honoring veterans than it is about easing the guilty consciences of those who have sent and continue to send others to kill and die for reasons that have very little to do with democracy or freedom. I can't seem to shake the feeling that the day is more of a slap in the face than the pat on the back of those who served, despite the endless thank yous, parades, and concerts supposedly held in our honor." It wasn't long after I read Mr. Fanning's letter to The Guardian that I came across the letter written by Mr. Luttrell that was our reading today. Mr. Luttrell's letter is included in a collection of letters edited by a man named Andrew Carroll. The book is called War Letters. You can check it out of your local library, I'm sure. Every year, visitors leave thousands of photographs, flowers, personal belongings, and letters at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. They're collected, catalogued, and preserved by the Park Service. In 1989, Richard Luttrell left the letter and the photographs that were the subject of our reading today. They were found by a Park Service employee and were later included in the book that was published by the Park Service. A friend of Mr. Luttrell's shared the book with him. He hadn't seen the photograph or his letters since he left them at the war. Upon seeing them, he broke down and he cried. Mr. Luttrell wanted to return the photograph to the little girl who he knew by now was an adult. With the help of the Park Service and the Vietnamese embassy in Washington, he was able to persuade the newspapers in Hanoi to publish the photograph. Incredibly, a copy found its way to a small village where the family of the dead soldier recognized it. A few days later, Mr. Luttrell received a letter from Vietnam that was written by a woman named Lan. Dear Mr. Richard, the letter said, the child you have taken care of through the picture for over 30 years. She becomes adult now, and she has spent so much sufferance in her childhood by the missing of her father. I hope you will bring the joy and happiness to my family. Mr. Luttrell immediately responded and asked if he could visit her. She said yes. And so in March of 2000, Mr. Luttrell traveled to Vietnam, the first time he'd been back in 32 years. And he found himself face to face with Lan in her village. The moment she saw him, Lan burst into tears and embraced him. I'm so sorry, he said to her, also crying. Lan forgave Mr. Luttrell, and the photograph of her and her father found a permanent place on a small altar in her own home. I was deeply touched the first time I read the story and read Mr. Luttrell's letter. For me, this story is an example of how all of us are capable of finding mutual forgiveness and reconciliation in one another. I was also deeply touched by the guilt and remorse that Mr. Luttrell carried with him for decades. People like me who have never served in the military can never really know what it feels like to experience war in person. Yet it is all of us who pull the trigger when weapons are fired in anger. Perhaps because when I was growing up, November 11th was Poppy Day, a day of remembrance, or perhaps because of the stories my father shared with me when I was little. I've never experienced Veterans Day as an opportunity to ease my guilty conscience, as Mr. Fanning suggested in his letter to The Guardian. For me, Veterans Day has always represented a day to appreciate the bravery of those who are willing to risk their lives in military service. Whether we call it Veterans Day or Remembrance Day or Poppy Day, November 11th is an opportunity to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, including our enemies. The story of Mr. Luttrell and his letter, and the stories of all those whose letters are included in the book I mentioned, bear this out. Those who wear the uniform of our country are human beings. They're not killers and murderers. They're ordinary people who bravely put their lives at risk for the causes that we civilians ask them to fight for. In honoring them, we don't glorify war. We celebrate peace and acknowledge that peace always comes at a high price. So next Tuesday, I'll be thinking of those who are serving in the military. I'll be grateful for what they're doing, even if I disapprove of their current commander-in-chief. And I'm sure I will channel my thoughts to remembering all of those who have died and who will die in the senseless wars we humans can't seem to find a way to avoid. Thank you so much for sharing this day with me and for sharing my thoughts with me as we remember Remembrance Sunday. Thank you so much. Blessed be, and amen.
Thank you, Reverend Terry. I don't think about war too much deliberately. So thank you for making it human again for me and for all of us. Now we have some time to ask Reverend Terry questions or make comments if you like, or bring up some memories that you have of poppies and veterans and anything else that feels right in the moment. Please raise your hand and I will call on you and ask you to unmute. There is Susan, please unmute.
Good morning. Thank you. I think if you look at the gallery view, you'll see all of us wiping tears away. You really have a way of bringing things to life that are abstract to most of us. And that's an important tool for us to have as things numb us to the realities of war and poverty and things unimaginable. So thank you for that. I did want to say two quick things. One is my father, my brother, and my uncle and my cousin all served, and thank God lived. Um, but they were all very reverent, about their service. And uh, my cousin, who's the only one still living, um, I'll I'll always send him a little note, on Veterans Day. He was only in 6 years, he was a pilot, naval aviator, but he did serve, and in a one of the conflicts, and he always, always, always responds with, "I don't really consider myself a veteran because it wasn't hard on him." And I always have to sort of berate him about that. I'm like, your service helped other people, you know, survive that. So I think that it's important for us to be reminded that it's not a day for mattress sales and, like you said, getting getting a day off from work. The other thing I think more poignantly is that I've been to England many times. I love it there. One of my best friends lives there, and without fail, when I would visit, and it would be what they call the bank holiday, which is what we call, like a federal holiday, a day off, that kind of thing. I invariably would ask, "What is this for?" And without fail, from my friend to her family to strangers in the street to the Uber driver or the limo driver, they would say, "We don't know. It's just a bank holiday." And it kind of broke my heart because, I mean, to us, we tend to take these, pretty seriously. I think for the most part, at least we have parades and that, except for Poppy Day, except for Remembrance Day. And I was just on the phone with my friend and her mother yesterday, and they were wearing matching poppy bracelets that they had picked up at a little market. So neither of them served, their families didn't serve, but they hold that very precious. And so, in the right places, you will still see them in those little shops. And um, anyway,
Yay.
thank you for helping us to keep that alive and reminding us of what matters.
Thank you so much.
Michael Johnson, please unmute.
No, I can't.
I did.
If I unmute, we'll get squeaking sound. Pardon me. I had breakfast on Friday with a friend of mine who is a social worker with the Veterans Administration, who works um, helping veterans find housing. And as we talked, I learned that most of these folks are not combat injuries, either physical or psychological. Most of them are people who came into the military with personality disorders and who had difficulty adjusting anyway, left the military with less than honorable discharges, and are difficult people. And I said, well, how does that happen? How does the military not do a better job of screening not inductees these days, but recruits? And he said, well, it's where they run their ads, and they run their ads on wrestling television and cage fighting television and all this other sort of testosterone driven entertainments, if you will. And it made me reflect on when I was a boy, and I grew up in the shadow of the Second World War, right? It was still a topic around the dinner table in my parents and their friends. And the reality of war was absolutely absent from those discussions. It was all the glorification. and frankly, still the hate to the Japanese, particularly. And it just saddens me that we still glorify war in order to get people to enlist in the military. Because I don't know that that's a question or something you want to comment on, Terry.
Rory Fanning's book, he was so gung-ho. He was a deeply evangelical Christian, and his time in Afghanistan turned him into an atheist and a conscientious objector because the truth really is so different. And he writes about how the US military recruits in college campuses and has like $1 billion recruitment budget to draw people in. And if you look at the statistics, the United States spends like 970 some odd $1 billion a year on this military budget. That's more than Russia, China, North Korea, and a whole bunch of like the next 9 countries combined we spend. Why? I just don't know. Creates jobs, I guess, in Newport and wherever. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more comments and questions? Oh, there's Dagmar. Dagmar, please unmute.
Well, in the Second World War, I was the enemy. I was on the other side in Germany. Of course, I wasn't on the enemy. I was 7 years old. But my father, my uncle, my mother's brother, and my oldest cousin, then 15, were all forced into military service as it kind of became late and necessary. And they all survived. The 15-year-old was with the flak detail. Flak was an anti-aircraft defensive station, and of course a primary target for bombing because it would eliminate enemy planes. And his mother, my aunt, was so desperate. She even at one time thought of bringing him women's clothes and give him a chance to escape disguised as a girl. But that, of course, was risky because if he had been caught, he would have been shot as a deserter. So for a long time, the poppies in the United States kind of reminded me of those things in my life.
Thank you, Dagmar.
I'd love to bring poppies back. More pop. Maybe we should start selling them again or buying them again. I'm not sure how to do that, but I'd love to see more poppies.
Well, I'm going to learn how to crochet poppies shortly after this service. If we are done with this,
Can I just make one quick comment?
please.
First of all, the place I volunteer, one of the places I volunteer, they donate fabric and we help sort it. It's very glamorous. But there was a crocheted poppy that was mixed in with the stuff, and I gave it to the one lady, Joy, who is English, and she's worn it ever since. But I do want to just mention it's brutal, but if you ever want to sort of be reminded that you can mix your convictions and your passions and your faith together, there's a true story made into a film called Hacksaw Ridge, and it's about I think he was a Christian Scientist, but he didn't believe in guns, and he signed up though because he did believe in his country and in serving alongside others, and so he became a medic, and it's a very extraordinary story. But he did not break his faith, but he served his country and his fellow soldiers. It's extraordinary, very violent, but extraordinary. Maybe read a book.
You.
Thank you, Susan. And now we will go to Martin for closing words.
Eskimos Have No Word for War by Mary Oliver. Trying to explain it to them leaves one feeling ridiculous and obscene. They listen politely and stride away, with spears and sleds and barking dogs, to hunt for food. Later, by fires and boiling bones, in steaming kettles, they welcome me to share what they have in a hungry time, in a difficult land, while I talk on of the southern kingdoms, cannon and armies, shifting alliances, airplanes, power. They chew their bones and smile at one another. How many words for war does our language have? Looking into a thesaurus, I see conflict, combat, warfare, fighting, confrontation, hostilities, battle, campaign, struggle, crusade, competition, rivalry, feud, battle, struggle. I add these words to the heavy list from my own life and experiences: ego, spiritual practice, letting go and letting love, fear, desire, blame, judgment, and letting beauty I love be what I do. From Rumi.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Lovely. Thank you. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace, go in kindness. The world needs you, and we need you. Amen.